Yeah, so did
the
Richard
leases?
Walling?
That's the leases, correct?
Yeah.
They're lawyers.
Sharp guy.
Forgot the one lead presenter, I can't remember his name, but he was like spewing off all kinds of different, like, knew how many towns had charters in the state. Oh my gosh.
All in favor of ending executive session? So we convened the meeting earlier because we had an executive session prior to this, so just for the record, we have 4 counselors in the room. John James is joining us via Zoom, so all votes for this meeting will be conducted via roll call, my favorite. And our first order of business is approving our minutes from previous meetings.
Move to accept the minutes of November 23rd, 2021 as written.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. John James.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, move to accept the meeting minutes of December 7th, 2021.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
John James says aye. Motion passes 5-0. Signing of the treasurer's warrants. We have a treasurer's warrant dated December 9th, 2021, in the amount of $943,768.52.
Madam Chair, Chairperson, I move to sign the treasurer's warrant in the amount of $943,768.52, dated December 9th, 2021.
Second. Just a point on this, we did have a $700,000 payment to SAD 35. So it's a big one. All right, all those in favor in signing the treasurer's warrant, I'm gonna do this right this time, Jeff.
Aye.
Jessica.
Aye, progress.
Jeff.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Mallory votes yes. Motion passes 5-0. This evening, we have Peter Hall here for our audit, for reports and presentations. That's all we had, right? For Peter, thanks for being here,
Thank you for having me.
and I'll let you.
Let me do my thing.
Yeah. go
Where would you like me to? speak?
You're good if you want to sit right there, because our camera now is 360.
It's an owl.
It is.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
The board that I sit on in the nonprofit world, we just got one of those
Oh, good.
for our meeting. So I am going to stand up for a moment and just
Yeah.
provide hard copies of materials that we're going to be discussing this evening.
Yeah, John's at home.
Okay.
So.
Good to see you. Good to see you. How are you? Very well. And I'll just leave an extra here in case.
Okay, yeah, okay, John wants it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me in this evening to discuss this most recently completed financial audit. In the materials that I just passed around, there actually are 4 separate documents. The thick bound book is the actual set of audited financial statements, including the audit opinion, the notes to the financials, and the required supplementary information relating to your pension plan. Tucked in the back of your booklets, you should have 3 other documents. A somewhat colorful PowerPoint handout that I'll be speaking to in just a moment. There is a 1-page internal control communication letter. And excuse me. And then a 4-page other audit communications letter. What I thought I would do this evening is to try and be brief and succinct. Is really just to focus my comments on the PowerPoint handout that you have. But by all means, as we go through things, if anyone has any questions relating to anything specific in the I don't know, 40-page audit report, I'm assuming you don't want me to go through line by line and page by page, so
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that if you wanted to, because I like talking about this stuff. But what I really wanted to do is just focus on the comments here, and then, you know, if you have questions, certainly field those as well. So if we turn to the PowerPoint handout and go to the second page. Before I dive into this, I really want to express my personal gratitude to Jen and to your team and to everyone within the town, but particularly Jen and her team for all of your preparedness and your diligence in the work that you did in getting ready for the audit and then assisting me and putting up with my, I'm sure, seemingly endless questions and working with me as we went through the process. It was a big help, and as I frankly, as I just said to Tim, it was a pleasure meeting Tim just a moment ago. And as I mentioned to Tim, the work that you are in very, very good hands in terms of your financial function here at South Berwick. And that's a credit to Jennifer and her colleagues. So thank you for what you do. So in terms of just touching on the audit process, as I just mentioned, management, the town as a whole, extremely well prepared for the audit and for the audit procedures, are very helpful in working through things. We wrapped up our audit procedures earlier this month and then proceeded to pull together the financial statements, review those with Jen, go through some quality control steps on our part, and then you now have the finished finalized product. In terms of the results, the single most important piece of information that I would share with you tonight is that, as you've seen in the audit opinion itself, the town of South Berwick has received a clean, unmodified opinion on these financial statements. And what that means is that these financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with governmental generally accepted accounting principles in all material respects. So that's as good as it gets. That's what you want. It means that these statements are correct. Now, as we conduct an audit, a financial statement audit like this, we use a number of different types of audit procedures, and one way that we delineate those types is we talk about substantive procedures and system or control type procedures. And when you think about it, a substantive audit procedure is saying, hey, this is the end result of what the client did during the course of the year. Can we gain assurance that that end result, that they say they have in cash or that they say they have in accounts receivable, is that number correct? And we can do certain tests around that question. We also can come in and say, okay, we're not so concerned, we're not going to focus for the moment on what the end result was. We're going to focus on how they got there, right? So we look at the actual systems, basically a detailed look at transactions that were processed through the accounting system during the course of the year. If you were Coca-Cola or IBM, I don't even know if IBM still exists, but or you know, if you were a publicly traded SEC based or related corporation, you'd be required to not only have a financial audit done, but also a separate internal control audit performed. Dates back to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act from 20 years ago at this point. That type of audit is hugely expensive and hugely intrusive and is not required in the case of the municipality here in Maine. So even though we didn't perform control procedures sufficient to allow us to express in a positive fashion, you know, a positive rubber stamping, if you will, of the operating effectiveness of the controls, we did do some internal control testing, partly to help us in finding our way through the accounting system, but also to provide additional assurance over those ending balances that actually form the basis of these financial statements. So even though we don't issue an actual audit opinion on the internal controls, if we come across something during the course of those audit procedures related to the internal controls of the client that frankly is bad. Something isn't properly designed, something isn't, you've got a control that you say you do it, but you don't actually do it, so it hasn't been implemented. Or you say you designed it, you implemented it, but it just doesn't work, or you're not, it's really not serving its purpose. If we identify something like that, that is of a certain degree of severity, and the two terms that are used are material weakness and significant deficiency, and one is worse than the other, but they're both not good. If we come across something like that, we're required to notify you as the governing body in writing what we found and what the ramifications of that are. The one-page letter that I referred to, the one-page internal control letter, basically says we didn't find anything like that. So it officially what it says, there are no material weaknesses that we found during the course of the audit. So that is also a very, very good result from your folks' standpoint. It means that based on the work that we did do, that the internal controls are properly designed. They've been properly implemented, and based on the testing we did do, they appear to be operating effectively and functioning well to serve the ultimate purpose for which they were designed. So that's all good news. In the 4-page other audit communications letter, which I'll be very frank with you, is probably 80% of it was boilerplate. If there were other bad things that we had found that didn't find their way into an internal control letter, this would be the place that we would communicate those bad things to you, but we didn't find any bad things. But there still are a bunch of boilerplate communications we have to make. But it also provides us with an opportunity to offer other thoughts, input, recommendations, advisory comments that aren't reflective of anything negative, but just things that perhaps you could do differently, or things that you need to be aware of going forward in terms of something that might change. And there were a couple of those sort of advisory comments that we included in this letter. One is just to continue your ongoing really review and monitoring of various internal control related policies and procedures that you have. Something that we work that I know has been talked about in the past, and even this past year, I know there were improvements made to your personnel policy. We pointed out a couple of areas where we think there could be some continued refinement of some of those policies. And then the other advisory comment that we include here, and Tim and Jen and I were just talking about this on the way to the meeting, there's a new governmental accounting principle or standard that is becoming effective actually now for this current fiscal year, for FY22, related to the accounting for leases in which you are the lessee. And for some municipalities, this is going to be a huge deal and it'll require a lot of work. Frankly, for South Berwick, I don't think it's going to really have much, if any, impact on you. I mean, I know you have some capital leases. I think there are 1 or 2 that were entered into this year, which already would have qualified as capital leases. Basically, what the standard does is it basically says that any lease that you have now has to be treated essentially as a capital lease. So you've got to create an asset and a liability and present them on the balance sheet. And that's somewhat different from what historically has been the practice. I don't think this is going to have a huge impact for town of South Berwick, but Jen and I have been in touch, and I'm sure we'll talk during this now current year, just to, in case there are any things that come up, if there are any such transactions that come up that might be subject to this new standard. With that said, if you want to turn the page to, now we get into some colorful charts. The next 4 pages are really just very, very high level graphic representations of the financial data that's contained in the audited financial statements themselves. One thing to keep in mind, and I know my former role, we've probably had this conversation in prior years as well, but one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at a set of municipal financial statements, and I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I'll be brief, but just for anyone for whom this might be new info. municipalities are required to basically almost present two separate sets or types of financial statements. There's, first up, they're government-wide financial statements, which are a set of financial statements that encompass all of the town's funds and activities and accounts and everything that it does. And they're presented on what's known as the full accrual basis of accounting, which is the same basis of accounting that IBM or General Motors or Walgreens or anybody would use to record their financial activity. Other than the government-wide financial statements, the rest of the financial statements, at least in the case of South Berwick, because there are a few exceptions here, but in the case of South Berwick, the rest of your financial statements are presented on a fund level, and they're presented using a different basis of accounting, the modified accrual basis of accounting, which is a lot more like cash basis accounting. It's not quite cash, but it's sort of in between full accrual and cash basis accounting, but two very different bases of accounting and two different measurement focuses between those two sets of financial statements. For reference, in your audit report, exhibits 1 and 2 are the government-wide financial statements, and then the rest are the fund financial statements. So on this first set of the first chart here that we're looking at, government-wide balances, this is information relating or being gleaned from exhibits 1 and 2, and this relates to the town of South Berwick as a whole. Everything kind of thrown into one big pot and computed using the full accrual basis of accounting. And what we've done here is we've just looked at some very, very high level financial aggregates. Your current assets that can be converted to cash or already are cash, or that can be converted to cash generally within a year or less from the balance sheet date. Pretty consistent with the prior year, 11.3 million, 2021 versus 11.1 million in 2020. Your capital or long-term assets, property, plant, and equipment, things like that. Those assets increased slightly from 15.4 million to 15.5 million. Your current liabilities that are due to be paid within a year from the balance sheet date, decreased pretty notably, actually, from 2.1 million last year to 1.5 million. That was actually related to some very large accounts payable balances that were on the books as of 6/30/20 that were paid off early in FY21. Long-term liabilities, essentially all your liabilities that are not due within 12 months after the balance sheet date, those continued to decline. They fell by about $800,000, and that's really consistent with just the normal amortization of your long-term debt as you make the required principal payments on those obligations. You take your total assets minus your total liabilities, you get total net position. And if we were a small business, we'd be talking about equity, but we're in a government, so we talk about net position. It's the same thing. Total net position actually increased pretty significantly by about $1.7 million from 15.6 to 17.3, so a very strong year financially. Within the broad bailiwick of net position at the government-wide level, we look at a couple different pieces of that, and probably the most useful portion of total net position from a town's perspective would be your unrestricted net position. That's a portion of your total net position that's not subject to external restrictions on how you use the money, or something like that. That component of total net position also increased by about $1 million. So again, very, very strong financial position to be in at the end of FY21. If you turn the page here, now we're into the fund financial data. And here we're looking at your general fund. That's, as you know, that's the fund that everyone tends to, put most of their focus on. And here we see a lot information that, in terms of the trends, very consistent with what we just saw at the government-wide level. Total general fund assets grew slightly from 7.5 to 7.6. Total liabilities were reduced by about $600,000. Again, that's tied in with that payoff of prior year accounts payable balances that I mentioned a moment ago. And at the fund level for equity, instead of talking about net position, we talk about fund balance. Again, assets minus liabilities. In total general fund balance grew by about $700,000 from 6.2 to 6.9 million. Just as we talked about, unrestricted net position as sort of being the most unfettered component of total net position at the government-wide level. At the general fund level, we look at total general fund balance, and then we break it up into any relevant subcategories, the most relevant of which, and also in South Berwick's case, by far the largest of which, is your undesignated fund balance. And again, that's typically a number that many municipalities really want to focus on every year as they work their budget for the subsequent year. And that component of general fund balance stayed virtually unchanged, very steady at about $6.0 million. That is, you're in compliance with your fund balance policy that so I know that you track every year. So that's all good news. If you turn the page again, here what we're looking at are all your other governmental funds. So everything, all your special revenues, your capital projects, your TIF fund, all that kind of, your permanent funds, all those other governmental funds. And for simplicity, I just lump them all together into one bucket and talk about them as a whole, even though in the financial statements, you'll see that there's a lot more detail provided for those funds. Same approach as with the other charts that we've looked at so far. Here you'll see that within the other governmental funds category, both your total assets and your total liabilities shrunk, frankly, as you continue to use those resources for their intended purposes. And at the end of the day, the net, your total other governmental fund balance really was virtually unchanged from 3.5 million down to 3.4 million. So really nothing terribly exciting going on there. The last page here, what we're doing is, again, we're flipping back to the general fund, and now we're sort of looking at the income statement, if you will, the statement of activities, and we're comparing your general fund revenues and expenditures to two benchmarks. What the budget was for those two aggregates for this past year, and also to the prior year. And again, within the financial statements, you'll see all sorts of detail supporting and providing a lot more information around this information. But at the end of the day, what you'll see is that revenues exceeded expenditures within the general fund by about $700,000. That's what led to the increase in the fund balance. Now, your budget had actually called for a use of general fund balance of $700,000. You actually had a surplus of $700,000. So that's a $1.4 million favorable variance. So again, very, very strong performance from a budget to actual perspective. And then for reference, we just looked at this information versus the 2020 info, and it's with some growth in all the numbers, it's kind of consistent. In 2020, your surplus for the year was just under $600,000. This year, you generated about a $700,000 current year surplus. So continued strong performance. I think throughout all the financial statements, you'll see evidence of that. And I guess all I would say is keep up the good work. I mean, these are certainly challenging times for everyone. And the town, from our perspective, is clearly weathering the ongoing storm quite well. So happy to entertain questions. And I hope I haven't put anyone to sleep.
It is good.
Yeah.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Go ahead, Tim.
So, as I start my 10th year as a municipal manager, I just want to first off compliment Peter. This was a great presentation, easy to follow, easy to read, probably one of the best audit presentations I've seen. I want to just compliment and thank him for working with Jen. And I want to compliment Jen and the staff for doing an excellent job. For a manager, our goal, one of our main goals in life, other than staying out of jail and keeping the budget numbers right, is a clean audit opinion. And I haven't had one in 9 years, so this is the first one I've had. So I want to just compliment Jen, and she did this all in the interim, being an interim manager. I just want the town council as well as the citizens to know how fortunate they are to have such a good finance director. And I want to thank Peter and thank Jen so that the public knows that she certainly did her job.
Thank you.
Well said.
Anybody?
I'd like to thank you for coming down, Peter. Always
Yeah.
good to see you.
Good to see you folks as well. And I hope everyone is eagerly getting ready for your holidays. Sorry, the calendar tells me you're just around the corner.
Thank you, Peter, as always.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad we're still able to work with you. I know you've kind of branched off and doing your own thing now, right?
Correct,
So
right.
thank you
Instead of
for
my own
still keeping us
practice.
on.
I'm happy to work with you and very happy to continue to work with Jen because, like I said, I mean, she does a good job and then that frankly makes our job easy too, or easier. So, all right, I'll let you get back to the rest of your meeting.
Thank
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you, Jen.
My pleasure.
All right, next section, we have public comment. So just a little bit of a change for the public. And I think we'll be including this on our agenda go forward. I'll be asking people at this point if they have any comments related to anything that's not on the agenda. And each person will be given 3 minutes to say whatever it is they'd like to say. So that's just a little bit of a procedural change that'll be a go forward thing. So given that, does anyone have anything that they want to say that is not already included on our agenda? Go ahead, if you could just stand and state your name and where you live.
Yes, my name is Ryan O'Connor. I live on 43 Flynn's Lane. I had sent an email about maybe 2 weeks ago regarding motor vehicle excise tax exemption. I'm not sure if it ever went to you. I've had some issues with my email. But on MRS Property Tax Bulletin number 13 states that any active military station in Maine are exempted from excise tax for motor vehicles. And then there's a caveat in there. It says that if you're stationed outside of Maine in active military, a municipality by ordinance may apply an excise tax exemption to vehicles owned by a resident on active duty is permanently stationed out of the state of Maine. I just wanted to see if we could bring that forth to discussion and see if we could. So there's other nearby towns that have enacted such an ordinance: York, North Berwick, Arundel, North Waterboro, and those are just ones I just quickly found. And York enacted it back in 2016. So just kind of seeing where we're at, something new to me that I was introduced to, and a few of my coworkers have approached their town council. And that's good luck. So
Thanks, Ryan. So I want to apologize for us not getting back to you. We did get your email.
Yeah, no
I had
worries.
relayed it to our staff, frankly, because it's sort of like, I'm not sure how to proceed with this. And Barbara did weigh in with some additional information on this. And I'm happy to share now, and I can make sure to send this to you via email as well. I'll just sort of like paraphrase Barbara, feel free to jump in if I'm getting anything wrong. But the council did talk about this back in 2013, which I don't think, I think Jack, were you on the council in 2013? So anything that you recall, please jump in. So most of us weren't here in 2013, but the council chose not to proceed with an ordinance for this because all non-Maine resident military stationed in Maine are already exempt from excise tax, provided that their commanding officer signs the affidavit stating where their legal home of record is. I will send you all of this because I'm writing a lot of stuff. And also that all Maine resident military stationed in Maine are exempt from excise tax, provided that their commanding officer signs the affidavit, and all Maine resident military stationed outside of Maine may be excise exempt if the home municipality adopted an ordinance. So I think that's probably like what you're getting at, is that piece of it.
yes,
So the way it currently works is that the Maine resident under the Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act can register their vehicle in the state which they are stationed without paying the state's excise tax. So if a South Berwick legal resident is stationed in Groton, he or she does not get the exemption in Maine. There's nothing compelling that person to live in Maine. They can register their vehicle in Connecticut, for example, and obtain the tax exemption there. Is that helpful? I'll send you this email.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
not really. I don't know what that really means. All I know is just, you know, in the caveat here, it says, you know, any one station outside of Maine, you know, our town can pass a local exemption. So I just not sure why it wouldn't be looked into or what the reasons were, why it was talked about, and either, you know, I don't know if it was voted on back in 2013. But I was just curious to see what the reasons behind it were. And I guess, you know, you said yourself that Mr. Krakis was the only one that was back there in 2013. So just don't know why it couldn't be voted on now, or just the reasons behind it.
I think if I'm, just to speak for myself, I'm not terribly clear on like this whole situation. I mean, I addressed that anyone that's stationed in Maine is exempt from excise tax. Any Maine resident stationed in Maine is exempt from excise tax. Any Maine resident stationed outside of Maine is the situation that you're wanting to
Correct.
address. Okay,
I have a copy of it too, if you'd like.
yeah, that'd be helpful. Does anyone have any thoughts or opinions on this?
I can recognize. Barbara, if active duty military living in Maine, but stationed out of Maine, came in with an affidavit, would that provide the exemption to the need for excise tax?
Because we haven't passed an ordinance allowing that exemption.
Okay.
If they're non-resident military with that document, they're exempt. Seems strange that everybody else is, but that one particular situation.
I can't remember what the circumstances were back in 2013.
Mhm.
Thanks for reminding, because I just rang a little bell in my mind. We talked about it, but I don't know what the inquiry was or what the disposition of that was. at that time.
So perhaps I would suggest maybe this becomes an agenda item for us in the future. This would be an administrative ordinance, correct? And not a plan, like nothing involving the planning board.
They have to offer an opinion of zoning ordinance change.
Is there any opposition to anybody us putting this on the agenda to take up? John, any?
No, not at all. I think it's something we should look into.
Right. So, Ryan, I think what we'll do, I'll forward you this email just so you have it.
Sure.
And I apologize again for not getting back to you.
No worries.
But let's put this on the agenda, go forward. It seems like it makes sense, would be a pretty straightforward thing to proceed with. Yes, Tim, but
Madam Chair, can you make that a motion, or can someone make that a motion, please? And do both?
yes.
That for it to become a agenda item should be a board action.
So I'll read the motion, someone can say so moved. Motion to add active duty military vehicle excise tax exemption to our agenda for our next meeting on December 28th, 2021. So that was Jeff who seconded, sorry, Jeff who made the
You make
motion.
So, which you can do.
I can make the motion?
Sure.
Oh, okay, that makes things easier. Mallory made the motion, Jeff seconded. All those in favor, Jeff? Jessica?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
Mallory says yes. John?
Aye.
Although,
Thank you.
motion passes 5-0. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Motion passes 5-0. We'll get this on our agenda for
Great,
our
thank
next
you
meeting.
so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your patience.
Yeah. Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything else to address that's not on our agenda? Okay, moving on, town manager's reports. I'll let you guys run it. Take it.
Madam Chairman and members of the council, thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Jen because I'm only on my second official day, so I'm still learning to walk forward. So I've asked Jen to go ahead and take this. I'll chime in with a couple things, but go ahead.
Absolutely. The highway building update, this Thursday, the doors will be coming in and they'll be put on. We just need to wait for the springs to come in for the doors to be operational. And we are working with P. Gagnon to get on their schedule for the heat to get installed. The electrical is still being finalized. Half the building is complete. They're still working on the other side of it. And we are still on budget for the project. The F-750 truck we leased for the highway was supposed to be in October, and then it was going to be in December, and now it's going to be in January. We do have all the equipment to fully equip the truck once it arrives. So we're just waiting on that. For the town hall, we have ordered a new sign for the lobby downstairs so that people will know that we're all on the second floor and everybody's hours in each department. So that should get lost.
I got lost my first interview, just say it.
And the sign matches.
Yeah,
And the
the
sign
one
matches,
front,
that is correct.
Which is important.
the lady at Dunkin' Donuts told me to come back over here and knock on the door again.
An update from the police department. So far in the month of December, they have had 6 arrests, 2 accidents, and they have had 6 officers attend training. Fire department so far in December has had 17 calls. Code enforcement has had 9 inspections so far in December, and planning has 3 projects on the table. The library for the month of November had over 1,800 items borrowed, which I thought was a lot. So, yeah. 46 people came in to use the computers during the month of November. We have received the safety reports back from the Maine Municipal Inspection, which we had asked for, and Heather Stanley has really taken on that project since she's taken on the human resources. And we just wanted to get that initial inspection done. The reports have been distributed to the department managers, and they're going to start working on them right away. And we also have planned to hire Lynn Orn, who is a safety coordinator and will help all the departments get 100% trained and up to compliance. We had our first managers meeting on Tim's first day on Monday, which went very well and was taken very well by all the staff. That was very good. Nikki will be stepping up as our recreation director, and we have also hired an assistant recreation director, doing a little shifting of the roles. And Sharon will be staying on just a couple hours a week because she wants to instruct the line dancing classes for the seniors, which I thought is super cute. And Sharon's retirement party and luncheon is next Wednesday, December 22nd at the community center at Newtown, if anybody wanted to pop in and say hi.
What time?
Newtown. And that's all I have. So I'll turn it over to Tim for any additional.
Thank you. Good job, Jen. So my first couple days have been challenging and unique. Been a lot of meetings, a lot of staff interaction. Barbara has only shooted me out of her office twice, which is good. The staff meeting went very well. I must say that I got some sideways looks when I brought out those little monkey outfits from the Wizard of Oz and explained how they could wear them. They're like, what? No. It was actually very well received. I stressed our core values that we're gonna have, customer service, positive attitudes, working as a team, doing the best you can. We talked about expectations, professionalism, all the things that I've already found really kind of exist here, but that I wanted to make clear what my expectations are. Teamwork, and that who the team was. I don't know, the employees have ever understood. The team is the employees, the manager, and the council. We're the team. And it's up to us to serve our citizens and to move forward with that. So we met, and I told them going forward, the last slide talks about what can I do for the employees? What can I do for them? And I clearly explained to them, and I'll explain it to you. So I see my position, yes, I am the CEO of the town, and I work for you as your only employee. I also feel I work for the members, the employees too. It's my job to make sure that I get their needs and wants addressed, so they're happy, good employees, they do a great job. And to make sure that I draw a good connection line between the employees and the council, so you know what they're doing. One of the changes is gonna be staff updates. It's gonna be more information on the manager report. You'll find more detail. You saw that tonight. You heard how many police calls they had in the last 2 weeks. So the more transparency I give to you, the more transparency you give to the citizens out on the street. So it works. I just want to commend all the staff for listening to my ideas and accepting me, and they've been great the last 2 days. They nailed my door shut this morning. I'm not sure why, but I was just kidding. Just kidding, folks. It didn't happen, John. I know, we did meet. I met with the acting police chief. We had a lot of discussion on staffing, traffic. We've started the budget process, met with the fire chief, code enforcement. We talked about his potential retirement in July, steps going forward. Getting as many paths and opportunities to discuss, so I can bring that to you at budget time. Of course, we've already started union negotiations and we'll be talking to that. Myself and Jen spent a lot of time already doing budget, so forth, research and economic status, getting more detail. So the first 2 days have been very busy. We're off to a good start. We've clearly identified projects that need to be prioritized and worked on, which is right off the bat, obviously personnel stuff, but there's gonna be the safety work stuff, keeping the employees safe, making our procedures in place for that. Then the next step in that is one of the things that's high on my agenda is a communication email letter that'll be going out every 2 weeks. So whatever we decide to get that out to the public so they can see what we're doing. One of the things I told the staff, and I told Mallory tonight, and I'll tell the rest of the council. So the world, the people in South Berwick, other than everybody knows Jack, who's been here for 100 years, is the public only knows what they see. So they drive by the building every day, they see the brick walls. Once in a while, they see the fire truck go by, they see a police car with blue lights on, they see the crossing guard, and they have an interaction with Barbara and her great staff when they come in to register. That's it, that's all they get.
Wait a minute. They see the best snow removal.
Oh, and they see the dump trucks and the snow
No,
removal.
no, but they see bare roads.
They see bare roads, yeah, they do.
Yes.
So, but those are good services they see. What they don't see is they don't see the finance director when she works hard to give us a clean audit report. They don't see the clerk when she answers the question of the veterans, exemption for registering vehicles. They don't see all the stuff behind. They don't see when police officers shovel someone's walk, when the fire department does something, well, the public works does something extra. They don't see when the janitors do this. So as we move forward, some of that stuff will surface up in my manager reports to inform you, because when I inform you, we're informing the public. The only way the public will know more is what we tell them. So my goal as your manager will be to get as much information as I can out to you so you know. So you'll start hearing more of that information out there. Last but not least, working on a program for, it'll either be quarterly or monthly employee recognition program so that, they'll be recognized. And then we're gonna end up, I already got Jen and Heather working on an annual awards banquet, whether it's a picnic or a banquet, we're gonna figure out how to get that funded so that once a year, I can get you and I can get all the staff together. We can let our guard down and recognize all our employees for all the hard effort that they do all year long that the public doesn't see unless we tell them. So going forward, it's a new opportunity for South Berwick. It's a new opportunity for me, and it's going to be a new opportunity for the team. You're the team, they're the team, and my job is going to be to bring the team together. So you'll start hearing more about what we're doing, things that are going good, because we always hear the bad. Now let's hear the good. And I got to tell you, you got a great staff. And again, tonight, I compliment all the people who do a great job here. I just want you to know, I'll only be as successful as they are, and so will you. And my goal is to make you successful. That's my input. Anybody got anything for me? Great, thank you.
Thanks, Sam. All right, moving on to unfinished business number 1, medical marijuana caregiver licensing. Just to recap for everybody, we met a couple of weeks ago, I think on the 30th. We had a workshop with the planning board where we discussed this, and it was decided that the topic of licensing for marijuana businesses is strictly a town council effort. It involves an administrative ordinance. So we walked away from that workshop with the action item of drafting a draft ordinance that would sort of encompass all things related to marijuana strictly from a licensing perspective. The draft of that I pulled together is included in our supporting documents for those of you joining at home. Included in that document, listed out a couple of required amendments that I could come up with, amendments that we would need to make as a result of enacting any type of licensing ordinance. Some additional definitions that would need to be added, and then obviously the full language of the ordinance. Definitely will rely on the experts to kind of figure out exactly where this all should fit in. But I think our primary focus is really on the language. So I was hoping that this evening, the council, we could review this. I think it would be prudent to have Phil Saucier, our attorney, review this as well. And then, even though we did discuss with the planning board that this is strictly a town council ordinance, administrative ordinance, not to jump ahead, but in our next item, I did address in our charge for the home occupation performance standards, just an item to have the planning board review, just to make sure that all of our language talks to each other the appropriate way. So I guess at this point, I would just open it up to the council. Hopefully everyone had a little bit of a chance to review that language, to be perfectly transparent. Copied and pasted it from the previous two ordinances that we had passed for medical marijuana storefronts and medical marijuana cultivation. And just made some minor kind of find and replace language changes there. Anyone have any questions or comments on this?
From the audience who would like to
Yeah.
speak on that?
Is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak about this? Go ahead and raise your hand. No, okay, council.
We put a lot of work into both the original January 2020 and I think it was September of this year.
Mhm.
The caregiver retail stores. And I'm not really seeing these, those standards jumping out in this text here. And also in passing a designated area for cultivation and growing facility. That was carefully reviewed and adopted. And I'm not really seeing that jumping out in this text right here.
Are you talking about performance standards?
Yeah,
So the intent, what we talked about with the planning board, is that performance standards is the responsibility of planning board. They get involved in those ordinances. Where, sorry, let me finish. But licensing was strictly an administrative function to be completed by the council. So this ordinance, this draft, is only addressing the licensing.
okay, so the common standards existing for retail stores and growing facilities
Mhm.
are not proposed to change.
No, so the couple of amendments that I added at the top of this document were just to remove the licensing section.
That's not what it says though.
It's the sections that I listed out there, 3A through, like, for example, remove from chapter 140-67.1, performance standards for caregiver retail stores, remove section N1 to N10. That's just the licensing section.
And that gets folded in some fashion.
You could say that N1 to N10 from the performance standards for caregiver retail stores is exactly the same language, with a few fine and replaces that are referencing stores, it's referencing just generally marijuana. So we're essentially separating licensing from performance standards.
And as we get along, and I know jumping ahead a little bit, the performance standards that we're asking the planning board to review are limited to medical marijuana registered caregivers.
Yes.
That's clear. We're not gonna rehash
Mhm.
all the stuff we did before. Over the last couple of years.
No, like, we walked away from that workshop. I understood, I thought everyone was clear, that the intent, that what we were trying to do was to bucket all licensing related to marijuana together into one ordinance. And have that be strictly a town council administrative function and no longer have anything to do with zoning.
Won't be in the zoning law.
It won't be part of the performance standards.
Okay, it will be in the zoning law.
I am going to be totally honest, I don't know exactly in what chapter or whatever this should
I
live.
think it has to
I
be.
know that someone knows, but it's not me.
Yeah, I think it really has to be. because-
Okay,
Because I talked about, you know, at nauseam about when we were forced by the state to pull out our
Mhm.
shoreline stuff we already had
Mhm.
in the zoning ordinance, then we were given this dictate that we had to create a whole new chapter.
Yeah.
So now we're stuck with coming back and forth from
Mhm.
140 to 110.
Mhm.
And it's just a lot of opportunities to get things chopped up, so.
Yeah.
I think they need to be in the same space. So people can find ease of reading kind of thing.
yeah,
So put in the performance standards there, so the licensing is just a piece of that, that I agree the council will do.
Mhm.
That will add whatever other language we have. for performance.
so. I thought that what we had discussed was that we would end up at the end of this with 4 ordinances. One for medical marijuana storefront performance standards. We have that done. One for medical marijuana cultivation. That is also done. One for what we still haven't hashed out, the medical marijuana caregiver home occupation performance standards. Those 3 are ones that the planning board was involved in. Then we will have a 4th one for the purposes of licensing only.
So. I'm not gonna believe it anymore, but I think it should all fall under one heading. And then I think it's whatever we put it.
Yeah.
You know, where it's back to 6.7.1.
Mhm.
.2.3 kind of thing. I'm fine with that, as long as it's all in one place, so it's easy to get to. And that's,
Again, like, I am not an expert at all on the numbers and where this should actually live. I think our big focus should be on the language and making sure that we're good from a legal standpoint. And I would hope that Barbara or the planning board or Tim or whomever will give us a little bit of direction on where specifically in the numbers and all of that. Fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions, comments on this?
No, I was yeah. I was
You're good,
understanding,
okay.
yeah. We just add, I felt like it was cool.
Jessica?
I did feel like there was a call out in the new administrative marijuana licensing ordinance in number C for a public hearing, and I just wanted to express that I do think that we need that on the books. Absolutely for retail and cultivation. Kittery did carve it out where medical marijuana registered caregiver home establishment license applications, whether new or renewal, must be reviewed and may be approved by the town manager. And other initial license applications are to be reviewed and may be approved by the town council after public hearing. So they kind of carved out the 2 types from each other. But I do think that we absolutely will need a public hearing for retail and cultivation.
I think, I mean, on this entire ordinance, at some point we'll have a public hearing and, we'll ultimately vote to approve it and stuff. So I think that things like this, hopefully we'll get some input from the public on it. Speaking for myself, on the public hearing topic, I am sort of on the fence about this. We don't hold a public hearing for any other business to operate, in town, and nor do we have a licensing process like this either. So I'm not totally sold on the public hearing. I'm just one of 5, however, but I don't necessarily think that's something we have to hash out right this second, because I think that that'll probably be something that the public will have a lot to say about.
a middle ground might be to establish, very similar to a zoning board of appeals process where direct butters or butters within a certain number of feet, we have standing to comment during the process.
Are we gonna do this for other legal businesses or just marijuana?
Yeah,
We're getting into some weird ground here, folks. It's a legal business.
All right, so as far as next steps go on this, this is what I suggest, please, if anyone has any suggestions, jump in. I think the next step would be to have Bill review this. Anyone disagree with that as a next step?
I think that's the smart way to go, Mallory.
or do we have them review it when we have performance standards piece already taken care of?
There will not be performance standards in this ordinance.
That's what I'm saying. If they need to be together.
So that's what we talked about last time at the workshop, was talking about how if we have the uses under their own ordinance and the licensing under its own section, then it would be more versatile, more fluid, so that we did want to alter it, we didn't have to change the actual use ordinance. That's how.
Because our current state, right now, we have two active ordinances, one for medical marijuana storefront and one for medical cultivation, that both have paragraphs and paragraphs of completely duplicate language. It's literally the same language. And so what we're doing here is we are defining a marijuana establishment, and this is a draft. I think there's additional things we can include in here. A marijuana establishment is any of the following: caregiver retail store, medical marijuana registered caregiver, cultivation, etc. And within this ordinance, we are defining a process for licensing any type of those marijuana establishments. They would all follow the same process. The only difference is the fee structure, which again, a draft, it's up for debate. I think I just put in the numbers in here that we had. Well, for caregiver retail store, for the cultivation, I threw in the numbers that we actually included in our previous ordinance. But that's really the only difference. We're defining a process for each one of these, and the difference really is the fee structure.
And in the use sections of each one,
Mhm.
it will, in my mind, it will be noted in each of those as licensing, go to the
Yeah.
licensing ordinance. So they are seeing there's a licensing portion, but you flip to that to figure out.
I guess if it's all duplicate, we could have the licensing piece act almost as a preamble, but then, a certain title, whatever we're calling it, 140-67.1. Other things disappear. So, this would just be the first set of paragraphs, sections and paragraph and subparagraphs, and then it would fall out with the other different performance standards for each particular use underneath that.
So currently, performance standards for caregiver retail stores lives in 140-67.1. Medical marijuana cultivation is in 140-67.2. My suggestion, if we follow that order, I don't know if this works, would be that any performance standards that we put together for medical marijuana caregiver home occupation lives in 140-67.3. The licensing then would be, if you're to use your suggestion, we could bump that up to be 140-67.1. Licensing could be 140-67.3. Like, I feel like we're spending a lot of time talking about like where this language is going to fit, when I thought that we were all on the same page, that we, at the end of the day, we were gonna have a licensing ordinance
Licensing
separate.
piece. There's a licensing piece that we're gonna take care of.
Mhm.
It's part of an overall ordinance that also has performance standards. in it. I think it works, but you have to have it live within the same overall heading. If we're gonna change the heading, because 140-67.1 will no longer simply say, actually, this is for standards for caregiver retail stores. That won't say that anymore.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
No,
We're
no.
not talking about changing
No.
that language at all, Jack. We're
No,
talking about
no,
removing
no,
a section
what
that's just
I'm
like.
getting at is that if we wanted to have one administrative section, we put it in as, like I said, a preamble, and then the other section just fall out underneath that, under the same numbers, only it becomes administrative is A, retail stores becomes B,
Okay,
a cultivation becomes C. We're gonna redo the ordinance and fold it all into one. Just all falls out, just like, other things. Doesn't have to be separate. Just a matter of renumbering, just put the sections together.
yeah, again, I don't know that it's necessarily for us to just determine the numbering and like where things should fit. Like, I don't have that expertise to be able to say that exactly where it's fit. If you would like to make a suggestion as to the numbering and where something would fit, I would
Sure.
gladly
Yeah,
welcome that.
I'm trying to do that, but-
I think it, just for me, it would be clearer to me if you wrote it down and I could see it on email
Yeah.
or something, just because it would just be easier for me than to try and parse through it. I don't know whatever you want to do, but that would be easier to grasp, but I think for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. There was a suggestion to have it all belong together at our workshop, but I didn't think that was conclusionary. I just thought we were separating out. The planning board is very clear. It's saying, we don't want anything to do with licensing. Done. Take care of the performance standards, the land use part of things. But in terms of breaking everything up and moving all around, I don't think there was a conclusion there. So Spencer understand that.
Yeah, I thought that we walked away with the understanding that licensing would be a standalone administrative ordinance.
That's what I felt. That's what I.
It's just a question if it's its own or whether it's a piece of something that gets conglomerated. It works either way.
Either way, yeah. It's just,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so then Jack, if you could take a look at our existing ordinance and kind of what you're thinking as far as the numbering and the order of things and stuff. I think that would be helpful. Okay, so Jack is going to do that, and then, but I think we can move forward in getting Phil's input on this regardless of that, because we're looking for his input on the language.
I'm gonna be sending it to him again. It's done. I'm just still trying to save the internet.
Because of the order?
No, we're gonna send him a document. He's gonna, punch in,
Mhm,
through it.
mhm.
He's gonna bill it out, he's gonna review that, and then he's gonna review something else, but he's gonna have to review it in total at the end anyway.
Mhm.
So I would suggest we get the whole piece, the whole draft together, and then send it off. Now, that would be a couple of steps down the road after the planning board gets done looking at performance standards. We amalgamate them, put them together, and now we have a working draft of everything. And then I think we can be more efficient, probably more cost savings as far as the attorney time.
Do you all have an opinion on this?
Go ahead.
I think it would work to put it all together.
I think you should, right, my suggestion, I agree with Jack, is if you're gonna have it reviewed, and I get the legal piece you've got,
Mhm.
whether it goes as one total document or it goes as two separate items, however you want to get there. Let's get it in totality, just in case there's a cross section that he needs to reference. And
Mhm.
He's probably not, but let's get the performance standards with the licensing, I think should all go at once, so we can
Okay.
make one determination. Hopefully, if he has any adjustments, the whole document comes back, gets adjusted by whoever, whether it's the council or the planning board, and can get its final review and get back without asking lots of money, so it makes sense to me to do that.
Okay. And then we would do that before or after our public hearing.
If you're gonna accept changes from the public.
It would have to be after.
Yeah,
Okay, so then scratch that. Our next order of business then, I guess, would be to schedule a public hearing, and I don't know this is where I'm kind of stuck on like the procedure stuff, and I'm sorry to keep harping on this, but like, I thought when I look at our current ordinance, 140-67.1, performance standards for caregiver and retail stores. I view that as a standalone ordinance. We had a public hearing for just that. And so if we're talking about doing what you're talking about, of still keeping the licensing stuff in the existing ordinance, then I think that changes our approach to public hearings. That's one public hearing versus what I thought would be two. Because then we're now just talking about one ordinance versus multiple. Right?
I just assume go to the public with as much as we can possibly have ready for it, rather than doing it. Because if you have a public hearing on this piece, with potential changes, then we have public, maybe two public hearings. It's a double public hearing, but the planning board needs a public hearing and we need a public hearing. And at some point together, it's all got to be put together. So I'm suggesting that we wait until we get stuff back to the planning board, then make those adjustments, get to a draft that we all agree on, and then have a public hearing on that ordinance. And then then we're clear to take action.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Please.
Procedure is anything that goes to the planning board, they must have a public hearing during the development of their language. They then make their recommendation to you. You then, when you have your final language of everything, schedule your public hearing to be able to take action.
So this is what I'm gonna suggest, because I agree with Jeff. I'm struggling to wrap my head around what this is gonna look like in the future, and if we're gonna be talking, because I think we've encountered this in the past with all marijuana related topics where the water gets really muddy and everybody's talking about different things. We're supposed to be talking about this one thing. And I think we need to have a clear understanding of what this is going to look like in the future as far as licensing and performance standards. Is it one? Is it two? Before we can schedule any type of public hearing or anything, because I think we need to be really clear on, is this a public hearing for one ordinance, for two ordinances? And I don't think that's not clear to me right now of what we're gonna be doing. So Jack, I think I need to see what you are thinking, and then let's.
Okay. This has been very good for me. Thank you.
Okay, good.
That's my own head.
Okay.
The other part is we need to rely on staff on the codification piece of it as to where this makes the most sense. I think we went to, well, 140-67, I think it was, that was adult entertainment business, right? Right, then we just simply went to the next piece after that and did a dot one. We ran out of numbers or whatever, but as far as where the most logical place to put it into the code would be, we're open to those suggestions. Because for my piece, I'm not going to get involved at all with 140 unless it's an edit. I'll refer to it that way. But what I'll do as far as language is to put that together. And I'm just going to go, whatever. I'll just look at the code and see whatever outline format we use. Whether it's a capital letter or a little letter or a Roman numeral, Arabic numeral, whatever that step down is. I'll just follow that format and do that. Then whoever wants to put a number at the top of the page, we can decide on that.
Okay.
Try and keep it as simple as possible. Can I just, from my head, I don't want to get the clarification. You guys say group together, you mean submit it to Bill to get it, not necessarily make it all one.
Right.
Okay,
So the challenge is, are you creating two ordinances or one with two sections? That's the challenge. That's what you're gonna have to come to conclusion.
Well, there's actually three ordinances.
Three ordinances to
that
one.
we have right now in the current format. What we're attempting to do, Tim, is to fold these into one overall marijuana establishment ordinance. And then it's going to break down in there. And I think Mallory's work to put this together is very good as far as, okay, the administrative piece of it should be identical for whatever land use we're talking about.
Right.
But then there'll just be other requirements within each uh, criteria. And then if another criteria comes up, then it's about to add another thing to it, but that's gonna be deep as far as I can see right now.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, we don't want to send, Barbara explained it exactly correct, the procedures the planning board has to have. And we don't want to send, we don't. I'm afraid I'll keep that on doing here. We don't want to, we don't want to tie up dollars and cents. We don't have to until we have, as best we can get the public's input, your completed thoughts to a document that's a working document. It may still need change and revision, but let's get the majority of it done so that when we go, I'd like to have John weigh in on this, that we send one document to the, to the lawyer, because it's just, the amount of money we spend begins to be not cost effective by having multiple ordinances or multiple documents.
So it'd be like one submittal to fill, whether it's one ordinance or two,
That's all I
but
was
just
Right.
one chunk of time
The,
we're asking.
the piece becomes make sure we get the public's input before we send the document.
Yeah.
John's right on that. And make sure that we get that before we send that out.
Yeah.
We don't want to make a whole bunch of changes legally and then find out the public's disarray with that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure I have the existing ordinances in a Word format. I have them in PDFs, but I don't certainly have them in a Word document. I'm not really interested in retyping the whole thing.
Do you guys have those anywhere? The ordinances and
Barbara and I can look.
I probably have 67.1 and 67.2 in a Word document. And I know if you go online on the website and go into the ordinances through the general code site, there might be a way to pull it over as a Word.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it puts it in both, like the state legislature puts a PDF and a Word. I don't
Jack,
know.
I think even if you just kind of like organize it with like, just like the first like section, the first couple words or something from each one, I think I can figure out a way to like export the PDF and get it into the right format and stuff, but I think we're just more looking for like, the structure is like the bigger piece.
I started at the beginning and we're going through.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so to close out this item, Jack, you're gonna work on that.
Yeah.
Do you think you could have that for our first meeting in January?
Well, I don't know, wait, I got a wedding to go to. Yeah, without a deadline, nothing is done, so yeah, sure.
I'm all about the deadlines. I think January 11th is our first meeting in January. I'm looking at- Yeah, so it's like a month.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so no action or
Greg's
changes. Sorry.
Greg's hands up, sorry.
Oh, Greg, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Are you okay with me commenting on the licensing piece? I know we spoke about that a couple of weeks ago and I said no, but as a planning board member, we did spend quite a bit of time talking about this. And I know you're going to be getting to the charge next, but the conversation that the planning board had a couple of weeks ago in terms of our conversation was that the licensing was truly going to be separate in our understanding as a separate standalone marijuana establishment style of ordinance to keep them separate. And so you would have the cultivation, the storefronts, and then the registered caregiver home occupation and the overarching licensing ordinance that establishes the licensing provision. I will apologize right up front by saying the feed tonight, could be on my end, is a little bit choppy. So however, what I'm hearing is it's going to really change our conversation because it almost sounds as if we're trying to put this all back together in a single ordinance again. So we're going to be mixing up the performance standards with the licensing. Again, I could be misunderstanding. And so I'm just curious as to how we're going to be doing that, because again, we had a conversation, it was going in a very specific direction. And to thank you for asking that we take a look at the licensing standards at the end for congruence between the two ordinances, because what's going to be very important is the definitions, to make sure that a definition here matches a definition there. So I think at the end of the day, we didn't really care where you would put this in the ordinance. But again, I just don't know if we can be working on an ordinance under a certain charge to say, work these folks as a home occupation, which frankly, a lot of that wording is already there. We're just going to have to look and maybe modify it. But are you asking to put the licensing all back into that? Because it's going to start getting some overlap, I guess. Again, perhaps I'm not fully understanding, but I really thought that it was going to be multiple, very separate and discrete ordinances.
We were discussing, it's not to have the planning board at all deal with administrative pieces of it. We're clear on that. And what the planning board is going to be dealing with is a subset of performance standards for medical marijuana registered caregivers. That's going to be the charge to the planning board this evening. And the other part of it will be an administrative section, whether it's up front or in the back, I don't care where it goes, but that'll be separate. It'll be part of the ordinance. And while the planning board was very clear about not wanting to have any input on that, that's going to have to be part of the planning board's recommendation ultimately when we go to public hearing on this. You can't parse that out at that point, but at this point, it'll be just performance standards. But there will be a part A, which right now, to me, looks like we'll have the administrative piece, and then there'll be a part B, which will be retail stores. And part C will be cultivation and growth facilities. And part D right now will be medical marijuana retail caregivers. That's how it's going to sugar off. And then that's only in 140 wherever out there. It's called 167, 140-67.1. But then we're going to have to give it into 140-9, which is definitions. So there's always two sections where it's all going to go.
I'm sorry. We're kind of talking about two different things.
No, we're not.
Well, we kind of are, for the sake of that the charge is next. And the charge explicitly states that we would be creating a new licensing ordinance. So what you're explaining is different than what the charge is, and it's different than what we were talking about with the planning board. So I think we're kind of talking out of school here, because I feel like the charge was written closer to the meeting and accurate to what was really talked about. I might, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the charge is accurate to what we talked about as two groups together. So if we're going to reinvent it, we can't be talking about A, B, and C, because that's not what we talked about. And so to Greg's point, Greg, I agree. I personally agree with you that you are on the right track in the planning board in working through the, not expecting to see the licensing part. That's how I fully did.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I agree. I mean, I've been saying this since the meeting started, like we left the workshop with the next step of the council crafting an administrative ordinance, and the planning board would be getting a charge from us to craft, I don't know what the descriptive word is to use, but an ordinance for the planning board to craft performance standards related to registered caregivers. And that was where we landed. And I felt like everyone was in consensus on that. And I do feel like there's going to be some pushback from the chair of the planning board in particular, if we come back and say, and now this ordinance is going to include licensing, because that's the whole reason we had the discussion to begin with, because the planning board felt that that licensing, and I think we all agree that licensing with a town council function, administrative should be separate from any performance standards.
Separate from planning board review. Planning board is not gonna be reviewing the licensing, that's carved out, we're crystal clear on that. Planning board doesn't want that part of it, but ultimately, when the ordinance is crafted, any amendments to chapter 140 needs a planning board recommendation. So it's gonna, they're gonna have to deal with it at some point in time to make a recommendation. Now, if the planning board chooses at the time of that public hearing, say we don't have an opinion on the licensing part of it, I guess they can state that. But it's gonna be part of these changes because it's an amendment to the zoning ordinance. That's how it works.
I agree. I don't know what else to do on this topic. Like, the planning board and the council, we all walked away from the workshop that there would be a separate administrative ordinance. Like,
Well, I think that's where we fall down, is the fact that it doesn't need to be a separate ordinance. It needs to be a part of the ordinance, and then we figure out where it goes. But that wasn't my understanding at all. The demarcation point was the planning board didn't want the administrative piece. You stepped up to the task of saying, okay, I'll create the administrative piece. Fine.
but my point is that same process happened in the summer when we went through and did the medical cultivation stuff. The exact same process happened where the planning board put together the performance standards and I added the additional language for licensing. And Bill came back and said, this needs to be separate. This is not a planning board function, which is how we got to where this conversation today. So what you're proposing is no different than what we talked about this summer and what actually happened this summer, which the planning board didn't agree with, how that process went, because the
And I don't wanna
licensing
give
was
it to
sort of separate.
We're crystal on that, let them review performance standards and make a recommendation to the council. Ultimately, it's our responsibility to present an ordinance to the public. So we now just have to decide in what form that's gonna take. And again, I don't really feel as though I was part of that consensus, but I didn't understand that in the workshop. I understand there was a refocusing, but
Madam Chair, if I may. What was the motion? You must have voted on a motion.
It's a workshop.
to create an
It was a
ordinance.
workshop.
So has there been no motion made at all to develop any kind of an ordinance?
So
Has there been
the-
an official legal action motion to create an ordinance? You
to
know,
create an ordinance for the planning board, we have our next agenda item is to review the charge that I put together, vote on it so that we can pass it off to the planning board to start crafting performance standards
Okay.
specifically.
So,
No,
so
we've
no,
not
no
had-
motion has been made yet, then,
For the licensing piece, no,
or
either one, there has not
you
been.
did it in the workshop and you got a consensus, but you did not create a body motion.
No.
To
you
legally.
can't do that in a workshop.
No, right, I understand you can't do that in a workshop. What I'm asking, was there at any other time, was there a motion made to? Because I was gonna say, go back to faulty motion to what it said, but there's no motion made, right?
There's been general discussion on our
Okay.
agendas to have this topic come up and make progress
Yeah.
towards
Okay.
where we are right now.
But anyway, where we are right now is the licensing part, and we're trying to we're figuring out if we have a consensus on moving forward with that. Wherever it resides, that's
Absolutely.
where, right? And I think we
Absolutely.
kind of have that,
Yeah, I'm not clear on where that goes.
where it goes, yeah, exactly.
And I guess where I'm disagreeing with Mallory is I don't think it shouldn't be a separate ordinance. It should be new language. Maybe we'll delete language from other existing ordinances, suppose that.
Sure.
And we just clean it all up. And that's not, but, how it sets within the existing ordinances that we have, plus proposed ordinance that we're working towards for the registered caregivers.
So for right now, is a motion in order to accept it, accept what Mallory has submitted and in preparation to submit to Bill. I don't know what the motion is. In my mind, I'm saying I like it as it's written right now to then move to the next step. I don't have any extra expertise to add to it.
What we just discussed is, excuse me, I might interrupt it. What we were just discussing, that it's premature to send to the lawyer.
Right, yeah.
It's not whole cloth.
So how do we get off of this item?
Yeah, thank you. So this is what I think. One, we haven't had a motion on this. This is our first actual meeting since we had the workshop to begin with. We walked away from the workshop with this to do where I drafted this language. In order to make a motion, I feel like we have to be clear on what this is going to look like. I don't feel like we can make a motion on this until, Jack, we have your structure in place. Because I think in order to make a motion, we need to say an ordinance or draft an ordinance. We have to be specific about what it is we're doing, and we're not clear on what that is right now. As far as the structure.
What I'm proposing is a draft. A council review, and we can, whatever, it'll be a suggested format.
Okay.
For the goal of having all these various marijuana requirements in one section. Is that the goal?
I think the goal is to get rid of redundant language in our ordinances, which we have paragraphs and paragraphs of it right now, because we have the same language for cultivation and the same language for storefront with some minor replacements. Our goal was to separate that so we could consolidate, address it all in one place, and also keep it separate from the stuff planning board. That's what I thought the goal was. I think for this needs to be an agenda item at our January 11th meeting. And Jack, hopefully you'll have that structure draft in place. And at that point, then we'll have a clear understanding of what we're talking about as far as structure goes and what the actual motion will be. And we can make a motion at that point.
I'll do that, but I am very leery about going back into stuff that's, we approved the storefronts and we amended it. It's standalone so far. There's been no. It's settled the way it sits right now. Cultivation and growth facilities is settled right now. If we open it up again, there's a danger here because we all know, there's going to be 40 or 60 people on public hearing or on Zoom every time we discuss this. We're opening up again because we know there's people who would say no marijuana, no way, no how, even though it's state law. Okay, so I just want to caution the council that if you open this all up again, it could be quite time consuming and it could be steps backwards. I don't think we have the time to do it, to tell you the truth. If it gets opened all up again, discuss. Because you change one word, we're going to be discussing the whole thing.
So, sorry, Jack, how is what you're suggesting not doing that same thing? Because what you're suggesting is.
I'm kind of going along with the crowd. This is a cautionary tale I'm putting out there just for consideration. That there's a process that's in all of our minds right now, but the downside of that is we're going to be having another potential 6 months of discussion about storefronts and growth facilities and cultivation and also medical marijuana registered caregivers. It's all going to come back up again, potentially.
But if we took the approach of creating a new standalone licensing ordinance and a new standalone ordinance for home occupation registered caregivers, we wouldn't have to touch the existing ordinances.
Correct.
So I'm.
So the other course would be to do licensing standards for medical marijuana registered caregivers, then put performance standards to it. Done.
That's
Without
already
getting
what
into
we
the other
have.
deal.
That's what we.
Yeah, so to me, the duplication of language doesn't bother me a bit, because if you're a cultivator, you're gonna have the cultivation requirements. That has to be the same storefronts. Who cares?
I think, yeah, not to belabor, I think that 5, 10, 15 years down the line, medical caregiver storefronts, someone says, hey, you know what, let's change the licensing here, and it creates 3 opportunities for things to get knocked off and go awry there. That's what I got the feeling. That's how I interpreted the conversation at the workshop, was taking it. You're now saying, all right, let's think about licensing, and you're looking at the licensing, not just in a silo of this specific use. And it was taking it out and you're thinking, okay, let's think of all licensing for marijuana. That's where I saw rationale behind it. You see what I mean?
I'm
I see
just
what you're
one
saying.
voice,
Yeah.
and so I'm just kind of batting my gums here. If it was the will of the council to go a different way, then, you know how I am. I'll argue vigorously from my point of view, and but if the council votes, say in this sense, 4-1, council voted, I'm with you.
Yeah, no, I was
That's
just
how I
trying to
work.
explain what my thinking
We
was.
haven't had that conversation with the new members, but that's how I go. I'm not gonna be fighting a rearguard action, because I happen to be on the short side of the vote. But in the meantime, dot, dot, dot.
Let's see.
Okay, so then if that's the case, Jeff, then I think I would like to have a motion now that that we are going to craft a separate administrative ordinance for licensing as the town council, and we can vote on it.
So, I mean,
Is that a specific enough motion? Let me know if it's ever not. Second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the town council moving forward to draft a standalone administrative ordinance for marijuana business licensing, say aye. Jeff?
Aye.
John?
Sure, aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Jack?
No.
Mallory votes yes. Motion passes 4-1. Okay, so we are gonna move forward with a standalone ordinance of a to be determined numbering convention to address marijuana business licensing. We will, however, heed your guys' advice about fill and sending everything in one package. So I think then if that's the case, then we do have a draft ordinance here where we could proceed with scheduling a public hearing. Am I jumping the gun on anything? Because this is just a strictly administrative.
Do that. Planning board's even gonna have a public hearing. Or, excuse me, if we have a public hearing, the planning board has to have an opinion. It's under.
Okay.
You have to get the citation. But it's there. And any amendments to the zoning ordinance. If the planning board has to have-
So we should bundle the hearings as well.
Well, no, it's just that whenever we have the public hearing, planning board has to have an opinion. And then the risk is now, we're gonna send them a piece of an ordinance that they really don't want to review. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay, we do that.
Okay, so the next order of business would be that we need to send this draft to the planning board so they can craft an opinion that might be no opinion on the ordinance so that we can then schedule a public hearing. That's the next order of business. Okay. I will send the draft ordinance to Bill tomorrow. Anything else on this stuff?
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on. Medical marijuana caregiver home occupation performance standards. So in the supporting documents, there is a draft charge that I drafted to send to the planning board, providing some specific information that we are looking for them to consider while drafting these performance standards. So I'll just read it really quickly. The town council requests assistance from the planning board in writing performance standards for registered caregivers who are growing marijuana and distributing out of their primary residence. In doing so, we hope to provide a mechanism for enforcement and prevent large-scale growing or retail operations in our residential zones without creating an undue burden on registered caregivers. We'd like to ensure that the following items are addressed and trust the planning board to address in the way they see fit: hours of operation, square footage restrictions, odor mitigation, traffic control considerations like appointment only and or no drive-through, lighting, signage, any necessary new definitions, and any necessary amendments. And additionally, we would like the town council, additionally, the town council, as we just voted, will be creating a new marijuana licensing ordinance. This will be an administrative ordinance that is the sole responsibility of the town council to build. However, we request that when necessary, the planning planning board review this simply to ensure that our ordinances talk to each other and we're accounting for definitions and all of that. So a motion would be in order for us to get consensus on this so that we can send this to the planning board.
I move we send the charge to the planning board for a medical marijuana registered caregiver home occupation performance standards as written.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of sending this charge to the planning board, say aye. Jeff?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
Mallory votes yes, motion passes 5-0. In addition to the draft licensing ordinance, I will also send this charge to Bill and I'll copy Amy and stuff. Anything else on this? Next item of unfinished business, this is kind of an open-ended item on our agenda, solar farm moratorium. I requested that this be added and probably should be similar to the licensing topic, and that should probably be a recurring item on our agenda just to keep us in check. I know that our moratorium ends in March. And just to be perfectly honest, I really don't know kind of where we stand with this, and I can't recall what our next action items were, and so I just wanted to bring this up so we can make sure that we're moving toward that timeline.
Doing research, I believe Jessica, you were on this seminar as well. A week ago, Friday, I think it was.
Yes.
There was a made article on solar farm siting presentation. Main Audubon, in conjunction with others, has developed a siting tool for how things lay out, and it's a lot of work, and but it is a very effective way of evaluating various sites for adaptability to solar. And things that came out of the meeting, that the highlights that were, a lot of folks, I think simplistically, think that we should be populating all of our roofs with solar. And in fact, that's okay, but it's not going to do it. If we're really talking, if we're serious about affecting something towards climate change, we're talking, you can help with the unit of this, Jessica, maybe, but I think it was like 5 to 6 acres of solar panels for 1 megawatt. I think it's a megawatt. So these are large scale facilities that are going to make a difference in terms of, how we move ahead. And it's going to require compromises with respect to land use. But people are working on it, and so you go to Vermont, they seem to be way ahead, but they have a lot more farmland in bottomland up there, Champlain Valley and stuff like that. But just like barns are falling down, the silos are falling down, there's no useful purpose of it. Well, there's no hay burners. They're trying to keep their fields open, and so they're converting silage, haylage to solar. And so this is Augusta recently. They had a moratorium in the effective ordinance. I think we need to get over that and see what they put together for a demonstration. So just like we do with everything else, we try to do this. We try and find an ordinance that's battle tested, been through the courts, but this is relatively new. So what we would borrow from other places, you'd like to have something that's tested in the courts, so you have good solid footing. And just like with these marijuana deals, nothing's been tested in the courts, so we really don't know what we got until the lawyers and the judges do with it. So it's early days, but there is some motion out there, and I believe if we can get a hold of that Augusta ordinance, that might be very, very helpful. The other thing is perhaps staff could reach out to Southern Maine Regional Plan and Development Commission, see what they have for suggested ordinance language. on this sort of thing, so that we can make some positive progress in January, February, as we move towards the end of the moratorium.
Greg, I see you have your hand up, and I also have a question for you.
I was just, again, I'm apologizing. It's just a bad connection. I understand you made a motion to send us the charge. I read it. It's fine. What are you doing with the licensing ordinance? I heard public hearing, lawyer, and planning board. Are you sending that to the planning board too? We're meeting tomorrow, I ask.
I'm gonna recap this really quickly because we've moved on to solar farm moratorium. I'm gonna be sending the charge that we just voted on for performance standards for medical marijuana registered caregivers to the planning board tomorrow. I'm also gonna be sending the licensing, the draft licensing ordinance that I put together to the
Okay.
planning board for review, and their opinion can be no opinion, but it's a step that we have to take. But Greg, I do have a question for you. Is the planning board doing anything with solar farm stuff right now?
We actually had wide-ranging discussion at the meeting last week or 2 weeks ago, and this topic came up and we were kind of all looking at each other. Yeah, where is it? So your conversation that you're having right now is timely. So we're kind of, again, speaking for myself, I walked away from that as we're waiting some direction from you.
Yeah, that was sort of my thought, is I do feel like that this solar farm topic also sort of warrants a charge from us to the planning board. Right?
It does, but I think it should be specific. And I think we'd be perhaps doing the process a disservice if we didn't have at least a starting point, a rough draft or something to say, okay, this is where we think we're going, and some parameters. They could be wide parameters, but awful when you're on an appointed board and you do a bunch of work and you come to the reviewing authority and you think you have a great idea. I've experienced this. You come in and say, this, you're all. What? You know, and you don't feel great anymore. But so I think in the collaborative nature of this thing, if we could at least have a general framework of what we'd like to see them do, then that would be really, really productive, as opposed to just getting off on yes, they go to something.
No, I mean, that's not all what I'm suggesting. But I mean, this seems to me to be at its core a zoning topic, which is the responsibility of the planning board. And so I feel like if we were to draft a charge that kind of, says something along the lines like Augusta seems to be a good place to start is a starting point, or use SMPDC as a resource. Like, this is where I'm sort of unclear as to, do we draft something to then send to the planning board to then modify? Like, that doesn't seem like what our process normally is.
Well, we have significant citizen input. People are concerned about solar farms popping up within their viewshed, and at least that's what I've heard from folks. And
Sorry, Jack, my question was just very process specific. Like, I'm just trying to keep us moving along here a little bit.
we're trying to protect the public's interest.
Yes.
And it's significant to that is glare. It's viewshed. It's these sorts of things, and if you take a little bit of time and pull up an ordinance that's already been approved and researched, glean from that what's appropriate for some growth.
Is that our responsibility though? To pull out and to provide the planning board with an ordinance? Like I'm just trying to.
Okay, then define what they're gonna do in a different way. That's just my suggestion.
I'm gonna draft a charge to the planning board involving solar farm ordinance development that we can discuss at our next meeting. That work?
I don't know how the birth of an ordinance starts. I haven't been on that side, so I've seen what comes. I don't know how you guys get to that point, so.
We beg,
I
borrow, and
understand.
steal from others.
Yeah.
In terms of the language, but as far as like the process of like initiating things, my understanding was, especially as it relates to zoning ordinances, that's a planning board responsibility and we provide some direction as to, we'd like for you all to take this on. And then we sort of leave it to the planning board to
I don't
pull
find-
together a recommendation.
I don't find that unreasonable.
Just include things like mitigating glare, mitigating a person's view from their property towards these things. And also, discuss impact on review, potential impact on property values. Those are the three things that I've heard. By having a solar farm next to a, yeah.
What decommissioning might look like,
What was that?
what decommissioning might look like.
I'll pull that together in the next few days and then we can vote at our next meeting, hopefully, to finalize that. And then any other inputs that we need to add. Okay, any other questions or comments on solar farm? Okay. New business, accept and acknowledge Bill Straub's resignation from the planning board. Did we get an official letter from him?
Yes,
Okay.
came through email.
So Bill unfortunately is going to be resigning from the planning board. He served with us for a very, very long time on the planning board. It's been a great asset there. And he's going to be resigning effective the end of the year, December 31st. So we just need a motion to,
I motion to accept Bill Straub's resignation for the planning board with thanks for his many years of service to the town.
motion in a second. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
John?
Yes,
I,
Jack?
Aye.
Mallory votes yes. Motion passes 5-0. Just a note on the planning board resignation at our next meeting on the 28th, we'll need to have 2 items to accept Jeff's resignation from the planning board and the conservation committee. He sent those letters in today. Action on planning board appointments. So earlier this evening, we met in executive session to interview just actually one candidate for the planning board, Ken Conley. The other candidate opted to withdraw. So a motion, I'll make a motion to appoint Ken Conley to the planning board for a regular seat with a term beginning January 1st, 2022, expiring June 30th, 2023. This would be filling Bill's.
Second.
The motion in a second. All those in favor? Jeff?
No.
John?
yes,
Jessica?
yes,
Jack?
Yes.
Mallory votes no. Motion passes 3-2. And then the last item, acceptance of Cole Lane. If you guys could just give us a quick update. I know this is something that we need to table.
It got postponed. They have to do one more thing to be.
So we'll see this at our future meeting.
We're hoping for the 20th.
Council member comments. Jeff,
I don't have any.
John,
I'd just like to thank Tyann and the rest of the home for the holidays. That was absolutely fantastic. Tree lighting was great. Everything over at Central School they did. It was just a fantastic night. Talking to some store owners, they had some banner business nights from sales. It was absolutely incredible. So just thank you to all involved. And I know Tyann put a lot into that. So that's all I have.
thanks, John. Jessica?
No.
No, Jack?
The only comment I have is I prepared a resolution for street acceptance. Give you a copy. And I'll- And, so there is another piece on this that in Article 1 of the code, rules of council 13-17. Every ordinance, order, or resolve shall have a first reading unless the reading is dispensed with by unanimous vote for those by those present, in which case the reading shall be by title only. So if this functions as a first reading this evening, then we don't have to dispense with it. But if it was the first reading tonight, I believe we would motion and a vote would have been appropriate. If to dispense with the second reading, dispense with the first reading, so it would be actionable. But I don't think that's the case. If we make it public as part of the supporting documents it's all there for the public to see what we're considering. So I just assume have this be considered the first reading of the Cole Lane street acceptance. So that when we convene again, we can just go ahead and not have to worry about it.
This wasn't included in our supporting docs. This isn't available to the public right now.
All the supporting docs for the acceptance of Cole Lane,
Yes.
and that's what's listed as bulletized items, are all there. But that would have been the resolution that we were acting upon tonight if it was appropriate.
Okay.
It's inappropriate because we don't have all the things done. So
Just a couple
I just wanted
minutes.
to just pass that along, to take the form of how we would accept it.
Okay. So this is something we would take care of next meeting.
Yes, we're not acting on it tonight, but that was just something else I had in preparing for tonight.
Okay.
Just figured that, I don't think you've ever accepted a street before, have you?
No.
Yeah, so it's just more about, kind of a tutorial about how to do it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And just references, just so it shows our work.
Yeah.
And I guess that would change because we would delete interim town manager and maybe town manager. We go ahead in 28. The last line.
Oh, where it says whereas the interim town manager acting as court commissioner.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that would just change that. Other than that, I don't have any more comments. I talked about.
Jack, could you send that to us electronically?
Sure.
I don't think I had anything. Yeah, nothing for me. Happy holidays, everyone. That's it.
That's right. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
It's down at the end of the run here.
So I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hands. Okay, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.